snowmobiles and, well, injuries and laws. Is it the same as it is for us on the road? Tom Sinus from Sinus Jamis Law Firm joins us to break it all down. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Todd. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Is it the same, auto and snowmobile, when it comes to the rules of the road, as it were?
Well, as the famous saying goes, yes and no. There are certain things that are the same and certain things that are very different. So let's just kind of review some of the very basic sort of safety fundamentals, and we can't cover them all, and there's a lot of great stuff put out by the state that's available online, but some simple ones. Snowmobiles are required to be registered, and the registration has to be displayed on a specific part of the snowmobile, like a car, but in a different spot. If a snowmobiler is going to ride on a trail, then they have to have a trail permit, which is in addition to the registration. Like cars, snowmobilers cannot operate while under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And similarly, there can be very, very stiff penalties for a snowmobiler that does so, and heaven forbid if the snowmobiler does so and injures someone else. What about speed limits? Well, here is different. You know, we're of course used to driving around in our cars and having various posted speed limits. We don't have posted speed limits for snowmobilers because, of course, the nature of the terrain and the conditions are changing all of the time. So we have a standard that says a snowmobiler cannot travel faster than a rate of speed that is reasonable for the existing conditions. So that puts a lot on the snowmobiler to assess their speed as they're driving, which of course will oftentimes change during the course of the ride. Snowmobilers are also required to have certain equipment. They're required to have a certain a brake system that will allow them to stop within a certain number of feet based on the weight of the rider. Also, and here, of course, is something different than cars, everyone who is operating or riding on a snowmobile not only has to wear a helmet, but has to wear a helmet that is approved by the Department of Transportation. So there are a number of other rules that are both similar and then, of course, different than automobiles, but we have a similar concept in that there are basic rules and rules of the road that snowmobilers need to follow.
That's great, the rules, the equipment, but when it comes to injury, an injury that happens on a snowmobile, what are some of the concepts that pertain to or apply to injured snowmobilers?
Well, there are, again, some concepts that are similar to other areas and some that are different. So in general, snowmobilers, like the rest of us, when they're snowmobiling, are required to exercise this standard we've talked about before of what we call the reasonable care or reasonably safe. If a snowmobiler injures another snowmobiler and wasn't operating the snowmobile within that reasonably safe standard, then whoever caused that crash could be liable to the other injured snowmobiler. But then there are some other unusual concepts that apply to snowmobiles. For example, the Michigan Court of Appeals just recently addressed the issue of an injured snowmobiler who was injured because he alleged that there was something wrong with the private land that he was operating the snowmobile on. And in this case, because of another unique statute, the Court of Appeals said, well, if you're going to pursue a claim against the landowner, you have to show something more than just a failure to exercise reasonable care. You have to show what we call a level of recklessness. So all of that is to say that an injured snowmobiler's rights depend a lot on the circumstances and the unique circumstances of the particular crash event.
I'm sure that each and every accident has its own unique characteristics, as you mentioned, especially when it comes to snowmobiling. But lately, a big buzzword, a lot of people talking about the auto no-fault law that just changed. Does that apply to snowmobiles?
Excellent question. And again, the answer here is sometimes yes and sometimes no. Here's why. In order to be entitled to receive no-fault benefits, the injured person has to show that the event involved a quote-unquote motor vehicle. And the term motor vehicle is specifically defined in the no-fault law, and it does not include a snowmobile. So if a snowmobiler is injured because of a crash involving just that snowmobile, or if they're involved in a crash with another snowmobile, then we don't have the involvement of a motor vehicle to trigger those no-fault benefits. But of course, as people know, snowmobiles and cars oftentimes are operating close to one another. If a snowmobile is involved in a crash with a car or another type of motor vehicle, as the term is used, then the snowmobiler is entitled to receive no fault benefits. And those, of course, can be very significant. And they, of course, depend on a lot of other things that we've talked about before in terms of what kind of no fault benefits the snowmobiler chose. So again, another example here of how the rights of an injured snowmobiler really depend upon the very unique circumstances of what happened.
Well, obviously a lot to unpack, and that's what you're good at. If someone out there has been on an accident, injured, maybe a snowmobile accident, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, they can find us online anywhere at www.sinusdramus.com. They can shoot us an email at info@sinusdramus.com or give us a call in West Michigan at 616-301-3333.